Sean Franklin. I am coming to you virtually because none of us can meet in person and teach classes. But that doesn't mean there's not things we can do to improve our sword skills. So the material I'm going to present today is titled How to Learn to Sword Fight Without Using a Sword, which is a bit of an exaggeration because you can't do that. So what it is more is exercises you can do that help you develop fundamental movements, which will help you in your sword fighting, but as the title says, do not require a sword. Now, this is very convenient timing, with COVID, as a lot of us have nothing to do but sit at home and get fat because we don't have room to swing a sword. So it's, oh great, these are exercises for that. But actually, the concept was to start to be developed a lot sooner, being that if we have fundamental movements, the movements themselves are not dependent on a sword. Obviously, they help you use the sword. Therefore, you should be able to practice them in a generic sense without needing a sword. And the inspiration is, so a lot of schools are moving towards an approach where there's fundamentals taught first, and then the core, more KDF stuff, Meisterhau comes later. And it's an approach I agree with wholeheartedly. I think it's a much better way to teach. But can we start learning the movement patterns for these Meisterhau and associated technique before we even introduce them? So that when a student is given, this is a Zwerchau, do a Zwerchau, all the pieces are kind of familiar, then they've just got to put it together and then learn the putting together and then the measure and tactics and everything. There's still a lot to learn, but it doesn't feel completely foreign to them. So none of these drills I'm going to produce and show are earth-shattering. They're not going to change the way you fight. The idea is more that you can use them, A, if you're solo training yourself and you just want to get used to the movements and moving, but B, incorporate them into your warm-up, and if you're teaching, the warm-up for your students, and you can start building these movement patterns and skills before you need to use them, so therefore introducing new techniques becomes easier. So this is kind of something that can be introduced and in some ways replace the regular dynamic warm-up. The regular dynamic warm-up is awesome at getting the body prepared to move, but it doesn't really teach you anything. So this is trying to serve a dual purpose. So these exercises are slightly modified to give a little more fencing context. All right? So the first one we're going to start with is something you may be familiar. It's a fairly generic warm-up exercise, so arm crossovers. Now, you're probably familiar with this. You've done them in a warm-up before. You have your students do them. So just with a slight modification, we can make it a little more HEMA-specific. And so what's that modification? Well, rather than just swinging the arms like this, which engages the shoulders, move the arms, gets blood flowing, it's good. Instead, we're going to try and rotate as far as we can while we're doing it. Okay, and I'm very inflexible rotating like this, so you would imagine you can get further. But now instead of just doing this, we try and every time push the rotation further. Okay, nothing too complicated. And then as we're going, we start lowering and raising the height that we're rotating at. Okay, and you would continue to do it for 30 seconds or so. I just showed it once because you have a pretty idea of what's going on. So why are we doing that? Why did we make the modification? So in HEMA, we have a lot of motions that we have to turn our wrist for, okay? That's fundamental, essentially, to doing a wind. So if I'm here, I'm going to rotate into it. And what you'll often see is that, especially newer fencers, they don't have that range of motion. It doesn't feel natural. And my range of motion, as you said, is terrible. So I'm still fighting with this. So when you say to wind, what we get is a whole body, let's turn everything up, you know, do this kind of thing, because there's not the range of motion to just turn. And I'm a bad example, this would be tighter if I was better at this. All right, so now during the warm-up, this simple change to the drill, just every day, they're getting more and more range of motion. Okay, so you're opening up the range of motion. Not a big change, but now it's just over time. You know, when you say you first start to, you know, let's say it's a few months in, you've just introduced regular straight thrust, constrainment, disengage. Now you say, okay, we're going to start teaching, you know, some winding mechanic, however you want to do it. This twisting, there'll be, the arms and shoulders will be more open. And then, you know, as you go through your career, you keep doing it. It just helps you work that way. So now, another favorite of the warm-up is the arm circles. Boom, boom, this is one I like to start with. Boom, boom, boom. And I like to make people go opposite directions because they have trouble with it. And then they actually start laughing at themselves and it makes the warm-up less boring. But that's not what we're doing. So instead, we're going to change the arm circles game. So now instead of going like this, we're going to change the plane. So it's 45 and 45. Okay? And the other side, it's very easy to imagine how that would look like. So why? Why are we doing this? Well, we see when people are cutting, camera focus, all right? They have a lot of difficulty maintaining the momentum in the sword. So what you'll see is instead of being able to flow through. All right, just fighting the blade for no reason. Of course, we can't always flow through. We have to do dramatic changes to catch our opponent unprepared, but you should be able to work with the sword's momentum. Well, everybody can do this. When you tell people to do arm circles, they don't go, ugh. But that's what they do with the sword all the time. So we're trying to bridge the gap in between, because this is more of a sword plane. So if you get people familiar with this and just letting the momentum carry it around, doing it with a sword becomes much more intuitive. And to really get the point to them about the momentum around, you can even have them grab anything, something with weight, mass works well. A book works especially well if you're doing this by yourself at home, right? And then same thing, and you get used to letting the momentum carry you around and feeling the momentum of the object, which is good for your sword. You have to learn to feel the momentum of your sword. And doing the Unterhau version of this is great as well. Okay. So just a slight modification, changing the plane of the arm circles to help focus on the sword recovery and not fighting our weapon. Okay, so you're learning to engage the body. Use the hips, use the shoulders. Great. Now we're doing it. Well, what's wrong? You see my knee collapse. It's like stage 1, learn to use the body. Stage 2, spend forever fighting knee collapse. So one of the reasons is that we don't properly know how to engage the hips to stabilize the knees. So familiar with, you know, trunk rotations drill, we do that in warm-ups. All right, it's a fairly common version. So instead, we're going to stand with our feet about shoulder width apart, keep our hands lined up at the center of the torso, and rotate. However, now when we rotate, we're going to have our knees slightly bent, and we're going to rotate our knee opposed to the direction of motion. So if I rotate this way, I'm going to rotate my knee away from the direction of motion. It looks kind of goofy, but like so. And now I'm engaging the muscles in my hip to resist my body dragging it over. Because if I did this, normally you tell someone to do it, you do it yourself. I go like this, and it just drags my knee over. And you tell people to rotate, it's going to look like this. The knee follows. So now we have to engage hips, work against the direction of our rotation, which is why if I'm throwing a cut, or an Unterhals are terrible for people driving their knees over, right? This is what most people want to do. Instead, now that I've learned when I rotate my body this way, okay, I can move my knee opposed to it and keep my knee from collapsing. So introducing that movement pattern right from the start, practicing it, allows you to do it instinctively when you're thinking about, you know, the more complicated thing, how are you going to swing your sword properly. Okay, on the subject of moving the arms, alternative version of arm circles. So now we're going to imagine a disc above our head, okay? And we're just going to trace a circle on it. And if you're trying to, this is being very educational. If you're following along, I would recommend pausing after I've done each drill and taking some more time to do them. All right, now we're going to take this disc on our head and go sideways, back and forth. Okay, and that's one, and then you would continue back and forth multiple times. And so, why are we doing this? Well, speaking of getting to Meisterhau, so we have Schielhau, all right, and we have a Zwerchhau. Well, what's the difference between the two of them? Mainly the plane, right? I'll lower my hands so they're. And what's the difference between a Zwerchhau and a Krummhau, right? I can Zwerchhau, or I can just change the plane from that Zwerchhau to being here, and now I have a Krummhau. So these Meisterhau, a lot of them are just imagining a disc in space and just moving the disc in space where you're cutting along, and it produces the cut. Whether I'm producing a disc in space here for my Zwerchhau, I'm moving the disc in space here for my Schielhau, back to my Zwerchhau, I'm moving it here for my left Schielhau, or I'm moving it here for my Krummhau. It's all about being able to visualize how this disc moves in space, and then these cuts will become much more intuitive. It's not, you don't have to learn 3 different Meisterhau, you just have to learn to move along that disc. So visualizing the cutting lines, like that warm-up drill does, will help when they get to that point where you're introducing all these new cuts. So, and once again, if you're not an instructor, you're learning it yourself, it's a great warm-up exercise because they don't take time out of your practice. They're just part of a warm-up you're doing already. Okay, so hip movement, okay? So this drill, we're going to feet bend, and all we're gonna do is rotate one hip forward, one hip back. And if I'm doing it right, it looks extremely boring on the video right now. All right, so if I do it wrong, which is what most people will do, you see these hips flying out side to side. And this one actually you benefit from doing it in the mirror until you figure it out. So what we want is one hip forward, one hip back. All right, if you can imagine you're looking down at me from the top, what I want is like like this, with this being my hips, this pointing forward, like so. What I don't want is this. So we talked earlier about not wanting to collapse the knee. If I step, all right, and I'm swinging my hips around, I don't have much choice but to collapse my knee. And it's inefficient because I want to go that way. I don't want to go that way. Instead, I push with my back foot and shoot my hips straight forward to go forward, okay? So I don't want to be hooking like so. So this helps us move our hips. Once again, looking at me from the front, it's very boring, right? You're not seeing motion. But if you look at it from the side, I was actually moving quite a bit with keeping my hips on the track. I highly advise you use a mirror when you do this. You might think you'll be doing it right, but you're not. Look down. So the angle as I go back contracts. If this is my leg, this pointing forward, this is my hip. All right. Now as this hip goes back, the angle contracts in here. I go forward, the angle opens up. I learn to move my hips so that I can do it without throwing my butt out. I can just boom, boom, keeping everything in line, not disturbing things out to the side. Okay? Next one, we're going to take one arm, place it on top of the head, wherever, it doesn't matter. Other arm, rotate, just like we were doing with the winding before. Palm up, palm down, palm up. Now, you're not really going to be able, the goal is to have palm up like here as you go over, depending on your range of flexibility. That's probably impossible, but we're going to try our best. Palm down, palm up, rotate, palm up, or as close as we can get. Right, I would like to be here, and just like this. And then, repeat for 45 seconds or so on each side. So, why are we doing it? Same reason we were doing the arm crossovers, focusing on, rotating the hands. It's so we get used to being in high positions with the arm twisted. So, if you've ever noticed you have problems when you're in, say, hanging parry, all right, especially on this side, what you'll see is a lot of people, they cannot just, bam, it becomes a whole body shrug. Now, depending on the tactics, you may shrug your body, but you shouldn't have to, okay? So here, I should feel comfortable rotated up high. I shouldn't have to shrug my body to make it happen. I should just be able to, bam, because I'm comfortable being up high and rotated. So that drill, I'm comfortable being up high and rotated. Okay, so this next one is interesting, and you're probably wondering what this little hexagon is for, and now you're going to find out. Do you need this? No, you can use anything. I just happen to have this, and it looks neat as a thing for a drill. So, we're going to line up right next to the wall. Foot, knee, hip, all parallel. I'm not leaning on the wall, lazy, but it's all in line with the wall. Now I'm going to take this object, books work really well for this, and pin it to the wall with my knee, okay? From here, I'm going to always keep my hands in the center of my torso. I'm going to push against the wall. 1, 2, 3, rotating at the wall, or rotate away. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And what you're going to find is that when you rotate away from the wall, your knee is going to want to follow you. Oh no. whatever you were holding up against the wall is going to want to fall. Okay? So as I rotate against the wall, as viewed from the front, boom, I push it into the wall, then rotating away, this is what's going to want to happen, creates the distance, whatever you're holding up falls. Instead, I'm going to push into the wall, all right, exaggerate into the wall as I'm rotating away. I gain control of my knee alignment, my hips can keep it under control, which is what I want, okay? So do both sides. I'm not going to demo both sides, so pause the video and do that. And if you paused it and you're back, that's great, or you're just plowing through. And if you want to make this really hard, start kicking out a little bit from the wall. So if I just move a tiny bit out, I have to push my knee in that much further to keep it pinned, and even, you know, a distance of that much extra motion on the knee makes it much harder. You really start to feel it in your hips, which is what we want. Okay, okay, moving on. So for the next warm-up, quote-unquote, learn to sword fight exercise, we're going to take one arm, stick it straight forward from the shoulder. Hand can be open, closed. Doesn't matter, not important. Okay? So from here, our goal is to not move this. The other arm is going to be making nice, big circles. And what's going to want to happen is this is going to want to start to move all over. Boom, bad. No. Arms straight. All right? Don't let it move. And continuing doing that for 30 seconds or so. Other side, boom. Nice big rotations. This one also benefits quite a bit from a mirror, especially when you're getting used to it. Once again, 30 or so seconds on that side. Why are we doing this? So there's a lot of movements with the sword where we quote-unquote push the pommel. I'm using that because it's a historical term. In some cases it would mean we're actually pulling the pommel technically. So for instance, I'm in a hanging parry and I want to transition to a cut. I can move my whole arms. It's a big motion, or I can simply move my pommel and go, all right? Here, move my pommel and go. I'm trying to do a krimpao. I can go with my whole body, or I can push my pommel. My hand is continuing through as if a good cut. I've just pushed my pommel to the side. All right, I'm doing a duplaren. Boom, push my pommel. I've krimpao onto their blade, and I want to get my point on line. Push the pommel. So this drill gets comfortable with the feeling of pushing the pommel. This should feel supernatural to not have this hand waver. That's what we want, okay? So by the time, you're introducing that, pushing the pommel, you will be very familiar with it, even though you've never, maybe you don't think about it here, but now you have less to think about. This feels natural rather than crazy unnatural, which it will. So the variations on that, you can make it more difficult. Simple one is you get comfortable with the main version. All right, now we have the hand out and we alternate like so. When you're doing it, watch your shoulders. They're going to want to start creeping forward. Make sure the shoulders are always back. Okay? The other one is to use, you can do it with a sword. A sword's a little heavy. Stick is better. Okay? Like so. And you'll have to get creative with the grip. You see how I'm just letting it rotate because you only have so much range of motion. And then on the other side. Like so. All right, it's an alternate version. If you have a stick handy, give it a try. You also do it with a sword. Works better with a synthetic than a steel, but a different version. And you'll actually probably build up finger dexterity. You'll see what I'm talking about once you try it yourself. So give that a try. Okay, and now one more, step and rotate. So earlier we did this drill, which was preparation for shooting forward, okay? And we also did keeping the knee pinned to the wall as we rotate. And now we're going to combine them into what can actually be fairly challenging to do properly. So to start with, we're just going to make sure we're stepping, pressing with the back foot into the floor, shooting forward, okay? And we're going to rotate, hands center of torso, forward as we do it. Now what you see happen here, my knee followed my rotation, which is the natural method. Instead, push forward, drive the knee out to resist the rotation, knee goes straight. So you're focusing on a lot of things at once, driving straight forward with the hip, rotating the body, not letting the knee fall. This is also helped by a mirror. A lot of these are, or a partner, depending on if you're running classes, and there's anyone around who can spot you. Other side, same thing. From here, pushing straight forward with the hip, rotating, resisting the urge to collapse as you go. Hip goes straight forward. Okay, so these are some of the exercises I've been coming up with in my quest to develop non-specific activities that prepare us for specific sword fighting skills. So once again, these are not a replacement for any of the sword training you're doing. They're extra tools to work into your routine, especially as warm-ups for your practices. So you can start, rather than the warm-up just warming you up, the warm-up warming you up is great, it's important, but now the warm-up is doing dual purpose. You're developing the body's movement ability as you're, just getting the blood flowing. One thing you'll notice, everything I did kind of here is upper body stuff. There's tons of footwork type warm-up exercises. They're fairly common, you're probably doing them, so I didn't really address them or focus on them. Those are important too. So I hope some of these at least you'll try out for yourself and integrate them, and it has a positive effect on your training and fencing. Thank you everybody who's watched this.